Today, we're going to be looking at the Iron Marches, one of the Ascalonian regions. We'll be getting 100% map completion, looking at how this place has changed over the years, some memories, lore, trivia, all that kind of good stuff. Thanks very much to TechZoon for submitting the footage, and let's get on in. So, we're actually starting the map here from the Blaze Ridge exit. Now, if you just saw the Blaze Ridge part on the playlist, you'll know how much I love that map and how steeped in history it is because it was one of the first ones ArenaNet ever made. This map suddenly feels a lot more standard, but still has the advantage of overlapping with a bunch of great Guild Wars 1 locations, and they do some very, very fun things as we go along, including like an underground, I should say, but access through water largely, like separatist hideout in some old tombs. This fantastic haunted area, some stuff to do with the searing, and then we actually get to go quite far north now, which is further north than you could ever get in Ascalon in the original, which was always exciting to me. You know, the story of this area of the world is that the humans lived here, lived under the threat of the Charr, but then as the Charr collapsed, lost their Carner, started infighting, the humans stopped having to worry about them so much. They built this big wall, but the wall wasn't really doing anything, so they started building cities and settlements north of it. These cities which were the first to fall when the Charr returned. So you've got this idea of this human hubris and arrogance and all these amazing places. They even had their capital city up north. And, well, you got very limited opportunity to explore that in Guild Wars 1. You did eventually get to go to the Charr homelands, but there's like this huge section of the world between the two places that the Charr had marched through and that humans had lived in that ArenaNet's never given us. Until now in 2012 when we can go a little bit further north. Unfortunately, one of the most major cities that should be in this area of the world, Draskir, which you can visit a bit in Guild Wars 1, is now directly beneath the brand in Guild Wars 2. And you might say, oh my god, that's really cool. We can have the branded city of Draskir and the haunted city of Ascalon, and you could do some amazing stuff like that. And then obviously the completely destroyed city of Rin, which now the Charr live on top of the Black Citadel. These like three fallen amazing places. But Draskir is not only under the brand, but it's also like on the edge of the map. I really wish that ArenaNet had extended this map just a little bit further east so we could visit it. But now it's just like a branded area and one of these mountains, rectangular mountains, so you can't quite go there. I really think they missed out. Very unfortunate. But they still do some cool stuff here anyway. Let's jump on in it. First of all, this area, the haunted forest with the shades and whatnot, actually the location of some very cool events. There's a haunted house here, which has basically introduced the idea of a necromancer ghost who was already very, very powerful before the faux fire even struck, and now in Undeath is kind of terrorizing this place. And you can see how the Charr interact with it. They can't quite get this spirit away. The haunted house itself has all these really cool events leading up to this big fight, and has a special Easter egg where if at a very specific moment during one of the events you stand at the back door of the house where you would never expect to go, the door will open and you can explore inside, and it's filled with skulls and all kinds of nasty looking stuff. As far as I remember, there's never been any achievement or Living World release or anything that actually makes players go in there. It's like a totally optional thing, but definitely worth checking out if you can get the timing right. Wait for that door to open and sneak inside. Maybe there's some other ways to do it, but like through teleporting through terrain and stuff, but that's the one that you're meant to be able to do it. So some Charr settlements nearby. Here we've got some events to do with the separatists, which do have a pretty big presence on this map. Honestly, I find separatists here really hard to swallow. I get separatists way down south at the Fields of Ruin near Ebonhawk and reinforced by the Asurigate, you know, defectors of the Fallen Angels and all that kind of stuff. But the Fallen Angels being kind of like the Seraph of Ebonhawk. Very cool name for a faction, right? But here, I mean, I know that small cells of resistance can pop up anywhere, guerrilla style. They can be assisted, but you know, by underhanded ways. It's not just the Charr and the humans. Maybe there's some third-party Norn or Asura or Sylvari or, you know, Lion's Arch members and pirates that help them get around. But there's like loads of separatist forces around. I don't buy it. They can't be living here anymore. This is full-on Charr territory now. And especially it kind of contradicts what we see in the novels. The truth is, I think that they're here because ArenaNet were a little bit thin on the ground on what kind of events and enemies we'd have to fight to fill out such a large world. It's only really while doing this playlist, and I've found that talking point come up so regularly, that I'm beginning to realize how tricky this was. I mean, I've thought a lot about how big Guild Wars 2's world is in the past and how difficult it would be to fill that much content out. I mean, inevitably, they do have to reuse stuff. I appreciate how far they went, though. I mean, Guild Wars 2's map, open world with 25 maps, is vast. Probably doesn't get enough credit as one of the bigger explorable MMOs, especially nowadays when they keep expanding on it. I think also maybe examining it in this way through this playlist kind of makes me more understanding of why immediately after launch with Season 1, they weren't trying to expand the map. They didn't add any new maps for a long time, or at least not permanent ones. You know, there's a lot to consider there about spreading the population too thin and making places look unpopulated, even though the game itself is super popular. And that they already had so much playable space. You know, if one of ArenaNet's biggest ambitions with this product was to create a world that feels like it's changing a lot and is dynamic, then layering Season 1 on top of all the established areas, making them kind of naturally feel like they're evolving and stuff, is totally the right move. But obviously we see that there's 1,001 problems with going for something like that, and a lot of real difficulties. Anyway, moving a little bit south, we're going to come to a lake in a second. This area is one of these triple areas again. This is a pre-searing area, it's a post-searing area, and it's a Guild Wars 2 area. We are in the Northlands right now. So for the very beginning of Guild Wars 1, if you went through the northern wall, having one guy hit a switch and you come through, this is where you would be. And in fact, I think there was a body of water even all the way back on the pre-searing map here as well. Now, obviously, the Charr completely control it. Let's throw up Shaman's map as we do this heart. This heart's pretty cool for what it's worth. Lots of opportunities, and it all kind of flows into each other quite well. You fire the cannon, which knocks chunks off of the wall, which angers the spirits and wakes them up. You kill the spirits and get credit. You pick the chunks of the wall up and throw them into the water, and that also gives you credit. It kind of all flows together in a great way. There's some nice events here too, and a consumable you could pick up here as at the end of one of these events, which is like a unique utility upgrade. You know, not skill, it's a utility consumable, and what that will do is actually give a lot of your abilities the chance to apply both poison and weakness, which is actually insanely powerful. Even in a world before break bars and weakness freely draining bars and stuff, just weakness is amazingly strong. Back at launch, it was slightly weaker, not just because of the break bar thing, but also because at launch, weakness did not affect critical hits. So if you had a really high crit chance, you could kind of ignore weakness, because weakness was only diminishing the damage of your non-crits. Nowadays, though, and for many years, the majority of Guild Wars 2's life, in fact, nowadays it affects crits and non-crits, so it's a massive damage loss if you are weakened, and that's true for enemies as well. I mean, nearly no enemies have high crit chance, so maybe that doesn't matter very much. Anyway, it was strong and very unique and very weird, frankly. I would actually argue that something like that shouldn't have existed in the game. It's too weird. But, you know, I think access to certain conditions, like, does my build have access to weakness? I think that should be handled more on a profession level than just everyone can get it, but they have to buy this weird, obscure thing in this place that runs out every 10 minutes or whatever. It's kind of lame. All right, so back to the map. Let's check it out. You can see that we've got a bunch of stuff here. You've got the Ruins of Sirmia mission opens, travels up to Draskir, as I was talking about. You've got the Great Northern Wall, the Northlands, Piken Square as well, which is a very cool little outpost we'll talk about, all located over this map. And in particular this. So here, through this lake, we can find a hero challenge where there's actually a lot of dynamic events that can trigger around this, but it's a hero challenge at the Searing Cauldron. So this device is a great artifact that we were only vaguely familiar with and talked to about in Guild Wars 1. But this is what was used to summon all these giant crystals that you can see that have fallen all over the land. That artifact is what turned all the water to tar and destroyed everything. That is what caused the searing. And in Guild Wars 1, as you leave pre-searing, you actually see them sort of activating it. You can walk over to it in pre-searing as well, and it's still in the same spot in Guild Wars 2. How amazing is that? You can get some brilliant extra lore from the Dermot Priory guy next to it. There's some events with this little town that we're overlooking here as we go towards this vista. This little fisherman's village has several events. Here, look, they're starting now. Where you need to defend against the Flame Legion, and the Flame Legion are trying to recover the Searing Cauldron. Very, very cool. And on top of that as well, they did all of this with the Syrian Cauldron. ArenaNet knew that it was such a big chapter in Ascalon's history, so they put it in this map. It was such a good move. And then, in the personal story, you learn even more about another Syrian Cauldron, which is great. So even Guild Wars 2 players who don't know about all those past events come here, experience this on this map, then later in the personal story something happens and they know what it's talking about because they've been here on this map. So very elegant. Probably the I know we're quite early in the video, I don't want to put you guys off watching the rest, but kind of the highlight of the whole map to me, except maybe Piken Square. So fantastic. So this area I don't really have too many memories of. I think you can see Flame Legion using whips and stuff here, at least in a mine nearby you will be able to. But what's pretty cool is there is a cave here with a jumping puzzle. It's called the Chaos Crystal Cavern, I think. And what is fascinating about it is there's a really wide variety of enemies in there that have been teleported in, and they have the disoriented debuff on them. Ah, so those watching the whole playlist will recognize me talking about that. Yes, the Thormanova reactor on the other side of the world, way over on the Tarnished Coast amongst the Asura, really is very far away. Well, okay, it's not on the other side of the actual world, but in terms of the release gameplay space, it's very far away, right? That actually started teleporting things in and out from the cave over here. It's like they're linked somehow. And when you start the jumping puzzle, you can actually find a member of the Inquest from the reactor, and they talk about it a little bit, which I think is great. I love seeing random little things connected like that. It totally makes sense. It's some kind of spatial distortion anomaly that's going on there as a result of the magical disaster. And it's great to realize that, you know, the Thormanova reactor was affecting things all the way over here. Also, it gives you a little bit of a hint about what the Inquest were doing, because you actually get a chance to speak to them. The only way in is just on our left here. There's a really sneaky hole on the left against that cliff, and you fall down there. Very similar to what they do in Caledon Forest. The very first jumping puzzle a Sylvari player can theoretically find in the whole game is a similar, very narrow hole. You can maybe talk about it on the Caledon episode. So anyway, yes, this ruin was once again an outpost. So I've talked about the Greenwich Courthouse being a special outpost. I've talked about the Serenity Temple. These are both locations that we've already seen and have come back in Guild Wars 2. Well, here's another one. And I know I've made out like those other ones are super special to me. This one is even more so, because Piken Square is like the first outpost of safety, the first haven that you will find north of the wall in Guild Wars 1. Which is really important because all the early story ever did was tell you how dangerous it was up there. That the Charr would kill you and you really should be careful, you have your backup. And when you indeed explore out there, you do find these much higher level, scary enemies with interesting skills, you know, more fleshed out skill bars. And you may be doing a couple of missions already where you've gone north very briefly, only to find armies of Charr and you have to run back to the safety of the wall. So it feels like it's super dangerous, and then you find Piken Square. And here it is, it's this beautiful little haven. So seeing that come back in Guild Wars 2, fantastic, because now it like merges things together. Piken Square as an early haven in Guild Wars 1. If you were playing Guild Wars 1 in like 2006, you'd find heaps of players standing here. You really would. They'd all be talking about selling Althea's ashes and various quest interactions, runs across the mountains. So there's all these memories I have of talking to people there and interacting with things. And here, it's still here in Guild Wars 2. The heart is pretty cool. You basically go to tombs and recover various artifacts. I think you go to rubble to recover artifacts, and then you take the artifacts to tombs, and you want to return the weapons to their rightful owners in their crypts. If you do it incorrectly, then the spirits will get angry with you, and you won't get progress. You've got to kill the spirit or whatever. So you can do it quite efficiently. But yeah, the Charr have basically taken that area over. There's actually a couple of events that happen near here as well. To the north of Piken Square, there's like a siege event that can interfere with your progress doing the heart, believe it or not. But they're kind of rare to spawn. You don't see them too much. I don't know why. Maybe it's because the preceding events players don't do, so it never chains very regularly. But yeah, one of the more obscure experiences for me to see those, like all the ghostly siege and whatnot. Maybe you guys know what I'm talking about. This heart's a weird one because obviously we're conditioned that if you ever pick up an item that's associated with a heart, you can hand it in and get loads of progress. But on this one, handing in the items gives you very little progress, but you get swarmed with them. So all these devour eggs that we're picking up, you might have the impression we can just hand them in now and we'll already be done. But they don't give you as much as you'd expect. But yeah, dealing with the Charr who tend to devour us and stuff, we haven't seen this for a while, so I think it's a nice little thing for them to have added. whenever I see stuff like this, like these lash-tailed devour eggs coming in and so on, it always, they're essentially quest items. And it makes me think of like other MMOs I've played, like MapleStory and stuff, where you have your inventory and you have a whole tab in your inventory for quest items. You know, maybe they give you multiple tabs. There's equipment tab. There'll maybe be a trash item tab, junk or whatever, you know, just stuff that you're going to be able to sell. And then a quest item thing. And it's funny because in Guild Wars 2, there are no quests. Renown Heart's the closest thing. And they're so immediate and localized that there's no reason for ArenaNet to ever do that. Why give people their own tab when they're just going to hand in the thing they picked up a few seconds later? That's one way in which Renown Hearts completely fail at replacing traditional quests, in that they can't be broad in their approach. It can't be, I pick up an egg here and I hand it in just outside the gates of Ebonhawk to complete this heart. That's not a thing. It's always very local and very immediate. And unfortunately for ArenaNet, their other big system for content delivery, dynamic events, are suffering from the same thing. They're very local and immediate. And that's why after launch, you saw they kind of had to awkwardly and retroactively, like fit the achievement system into their questing system, and things have been weird ever since. So, oddly enough, there is kind of a quest item thing in the game. As you complete personal story steps, sometimes you get an item embedded into the journal. Like if you read your personal story journal, you might sometimes find items there as though it is its own inventory. But that's just, you know, that's just UI, and that's just being a little bit tricky. It's a feature I appreciate, but it is just UI. So, speaking of the whips, I think we actually get to whip people ourselves here. You can take the role of being a brutal Charr taskmaster that keeps people at work, which is kind of crazy, to be honest, but here it is. And, you know, in terms of we tend to force to be the good guy, you get to whip people, you get to pick up the various ore and stuff and throw it in here. As you can see, you got chunks of scourged or iron. Really weird item UI there, by the way. That ingot there. Usually ArenaNet reuse all of the icons from other stuff like crafting and equipment and whatnot. But here, I don't think that appears anywhere else. What kind of ingot would that be? Blood metal ingot or something? I don't know. Anyway. So yeah, a nice little quest there. I've always liked that heart because it feels like I've actually got a different job for a moment. You know, I am now a mine runner and I get to do stuff in the mines. So on our right, you just saw some big, weird-looking plants. So that, of course, is associated with stories that weren't here at launch. That's Heart of Thorns and Season 2 oriented stuff when, you know, all the Morgemorth vines started appearing everywhere. That has been the biggest change through Living World visually to any Charr map, as far as I remember. They've got all this history and all these layers to them, but almost none of it is a result of ongoing Guild Wars 2 stories. It's all stuff from before the game came out. It's like Kessex had the Nightmare Court Tower appear there and so on. There's a lot of stuff, and you know, outside Gendaron Field, Lion's Arch and Gendaron Fields, the Aetherblade base appeared and stuff. Really, for the Charr stuff, it's just this. This is what you've had appear. And it's cool, and it was nice, and it was cool to see the reach of the jungle, you know, all the way over here. Again, very, very far away from the Maguma jungle, and yet we saw the vines. They added actually some pretty brutally scary and dangerous dynamic events here as well that you do want to watch out for, especially if you're still just leveling. Obviously, they're scaled down, the enemies, but they're still very, very, very dangerous, and you're in for a nasty surprise. I actually kind of like that, because in a way, it sort of makes this event feel very threatening, and the thing that caused it to feel very threatening, you know. This heart is either a pain in the bum or it's really easy based on whether an event is going on nearby. I guess we're going to do a bit of progress and then leave and maybe get a hero challenge or whatever and come back. The event that's nearby is sometimes you can fight a flame effigy here. One of the cooler enemy varieties that you don't see much of in the Charr maps, actually. I'm now kind of realizing. So yeah, back on the topic of these maps have loads of history and none of it's really post Guild Wars 2. There is a big thing that always has been on the table for the studio in terms of changing all of the Charr maps and introducing a story. And they kind of flirted with it in Season 2, but they never went with it. And I think it's because if they go with this story, it's going to be too much change. It will involve a lot of revamps to most of the Charr areas. And that is the proposition of ending the foe fire. If the Charr ever figured out how to do that, for a long time with Guild Wars 2, it kind of seemed like, well, what are you going to do with all the ghosts? All the ghosts have to go away. So now loads of hearts have to change, and loads of events have to change, and huge chunks of the personal story start feeling weird, just like they started feeling weird when Lion's Arch was destroyed, and yet we were still doing missions. Like there was a phase of Guild Wars 2 where you didn't get to revisit old LA. You were doing Lion's Arch related quests in destroyed LA, which was just so weird. And, you know, you'd have stuff like that to figure out again. It'd just be crazy. It'd be so much work. They flirted with the idea of maybe the ghosts would go away in the Season 2 story, kind of stepped back from it. I mentioned earlier in the playlist that there are a lot of little things here and there, especially around the Black Citadel and Diessa, that suggest there are technologies on the way that will get rid of them. But that's all been stagnant, and I wouldn't be surprised if it stays stagnant till the end of the game. There is another thought, though. Nowadays, the devs are quite comfortable pushing the story forwards because they've kind of settled into this idea that every episode of this playlist, we've seen a map, right? Well, each map... Here's a cool sinkhole into the underground area I was talking about. Oh, no, this is just to fight the hidden little ogre in here, who's like a happy ogre, and you get to duel him. So every map we've seen so far is kind of just fixed in time now. And the idea is that because they are fixed in time, you can do stuff like destroy the Divinity's Reach Dam. Because while you're in Queensdale, you're looking at it from one time period. And when you're north of it in Lake Doric, and it's all drained out, well, that was just further forward in time. And there's nothing weird going on there. There's just like this implicit sense that we're kind of time traveling as we go through those portals almost. The portals are obviously just a gameplay manifestation. They're not actually really there in lore. So the wires don't cross in an ugly way. We know to just separate them in our minds and our enjoyment of the product. So it does get a bit messy because then in Queensdale, sometimes they'll do an update where a really newly introduced character like Kerida, for example, appears in Queensdale. Or awakened stuff appears in Queensdale. It's like, well, hold on, what's going on here? Is this back in time now or what? So it is all a bit vague and flimsy, but the devs could, in theory, if they wanted, defeat the ghosts and just leave all the maps as they are because they're all back in time. And hey, whatever. And then, you know, slot in a new Ascalon map. Hey, maybe one that explores Branded Draskir. And when we're at Branded Draskir, we also get to see what the world is like, what the region is like, with no Ascalonian ghosts around. It's weird, the proposition of adding a new map. See, in Kryta, there is a big space right central to Kryta near Lion's Arch where they could totally add a new map, right? It would be the place near Garenhof. On the Tarnished Coast, there's totally a place they could add a map right to the right of Ratasum. So these are brilliant opportunities still available to the studio to add a map that exists at a more modern time in the story so they can do fun things, right? They can remove threats and stuff. But for and the Shiver Peaks too, there's space. They can do it for all of the races. But for Ascalon, if you actually look at a full map of Ascalon in Guild Wars 2, they kind of did it amazingly. Like, there's no weird gaps anywhere. You've got maybe a bit of choice to add a map south of the Black Citadel, but you're and sort of near the Fields of Ruin, but you're very quickly into the Shiver Peaks there. That's where the second Wizard's Tower would be. That would be very cool. Or maybe your only other choice to really get a map that feels like Iron Legion territory, Foe Fire territory, is right next to where we are right now. There's the Brand on our east, and just over that mountain on our east, you could maybe dump a map there. And it's kind of distant, but it's still close enough, I think, to the Black Citadel and stuff. It can feel like Iron Legion and Heartland. It can feel like Foe Fire affected territory. It can still have the Great Northern Wall around there and all that kind of stuff. You can probably just about do it, but you're sort of pushing it. It feels a bit remote, especially considering hardly any Guild Wars 1 Ascalon gameplay took place there. The advantage, of course, though, is if you go to Draskir in Guild Wars 1 and you look east over those hills. Now, I don't have footage to pull up on screen for you guys for that right now. But if you were to do that, you would still see lots of ruined cityscapes and stuff. So I think we're 100% in the clear for like human and Foe Fire influence there. And don't forget, the epicenter of the Foe Fire is Ascalon City. So it's not the Black Citadel. It's sort of more to the east anyway. And we're not far away from that right now. We're really not far away from Ascalon City. Just a little bit north. It feels like we're kind of far because of the level of all the enemies. But yeah. Anyway, we're in a really badass place. And that POI in particular is a tricky one. Bit like the Crate Witch in Keswick's Hills. I always get scared to go into that cave. But if you're going for the POI and you just swim against it, you won't be able to get there. You have to find the entrance to the cave and go much lower down. But yeah, this is probably as far as the core game is concerned, the widest stretch of brand that you could find. The brand is actually quite thick here. And no, this is not where it originated. It originated even further up north. But this is the highest level brand as well area in the core game. There's another Charr map that will be a higher level, but that takes us much more over to the west. And we'll deal more with the Flame Legion and what the Flame Legion are up to. So we are only... What level are we right now? I guess for me to see on screen, we have to wait for some kind of heart or something, and then I can see it. Or we can see maybe the level of the enemies. Okay, we're about level 57. There are 80 levels in the game. We're only level 50s at the moment, and this is the highest level brand. So that's always been very interesting to me. You'll see there is a meta here, devouring the brand, but there's not like some big, you know, final send-off. Okay, this is end game brand, so to speak. If any of that existed, it was really the Shatterer down below. And I guess ArenaNet didn't see this as anything to remark upon when they were originally making the world, because again, the whole game was meant to be endgame. So why does it matter if there's no brand at level 80? The truth is, it did matter a little bit, just a little bit, because of the economy. So one side of the legendary crafting and Mystic Forge crafting is the use of lodestones in the game. And hell, even just lots of runes and stuff. So each dragon has a lodestone associated with it, and you get that lodestone from like killing only really high level mobs, like around level 80 mobs. They have a chance to drop them, usually elementals. You could also alternatively get them from the dungeons, like each dungeon was associated with a different lodestone. The problem was, there wasn't really anything for the branded lodestone. So the crystal lodestone was like a weird odd one out that didn't really drop much anywhere, and the devs had to be careful about not using it in too many recipes, so it just felt kind of a strange one. Nowadays, there's lots of more places that we can visit the brand way to the south that kind of fill in that, but for many years they didn't exist. For many years this was it. You wanted high level brand? Well, this is as far as you can go. So, by the way, we had a good hero challenge. By the way, look at that warped bridge. Look how cool that warped bridge is. I get the sense that they made a lot of really badass architecture and fun things that get twisted by the brand. But because there was kind of limited gameplay, we kind of miss out on some of it. So, yes, we kind of just missed out on a really badass hero challenge where we find out a bit more about Almora, who she was, where she was, what she was doing. And you've got to, like, answer... a sort of reading comprehension style, just like we did in the Asura area, facts about her life, like what was she? Was she a legionnaire, a centurion, a tribune? What legion was she with? Maybe it was also what year did stuff happen to her? And yeah, anyway, so I like that because we're far away from the Vigil, but a lot of Vigil story takes place in this region of the world. Not actually this particular region. There's no real great personal story quests that happen in this map, by the way. This map is a very odd one for that, in that you get a couple in the south, but very little after that. Strange one. But yeah, you know, it's all a vigil-y kind of feeling thing with Almora, and that keeps your connection, even though they're based way off in Gandharan fields. We're at the northernmost extreme of the map now, which actually means we're further north than anywhere Guild Wars 1 got. We're a good chunk further north than just Skier, which I've spent so long talking about. Very cozy little POI up there, going all the way up to the waterfall. This place has always been so weird to me, the infestation. Look, and we're still technically under... a meta event devouring the brand. There's no events that come here. This meta doesn't come here or do anything, right? The branded Siege Devourer is badass, though. I love this guy. He's about as high level as you could find something branded. And Siege Devourers themselves are just such a cool, iconic side of the Charr. To then have a branded one and be so big, he's awesome. He is really, really badass. There's also a cool, like, weird spiral staircase area that we can ramp our way down in a minute, but there's mostly just a POI there, not much else to do. You'll also see in the back of this cave are more like rocks infused with magic that look destructible. Reminds me a lot of something I talked about in the Harathi episode. Like at the back of the War King's camp, there's like this wall with these runes, and it's like, okay, where's the dynamic event that breaks this? I always feel like this cave is very similar to that. I don't know whether you guys have that same experience. Oh, and also, talking about my launch memories, we are now in territory that I got to way before the majority of the player base. And I kind of regret this. So I was talking about this with bonus experience. Me and one particular other guild member, one friend, who I don't play the game with anymore. He sometimes comments on my videos, so maybe he's out there. Maybe he's watching this. But we kind of alone just because we were no life in the game, we ended up just exploring Ascalon together. Ascalon felt kind of fringe and out of the way. I think most people were more interested in getting towards ore, and most people were more interested in, you know, getting a lot of money, getting to level 80. You know how it is when an MMO comes out. People aren't really into exploring or indulging in it. They're just kind of beelining. Or they're playing just a little bit slower. I was no-lifing it, but not beelining. And so that meant that I ended up here you go, this is the ramp area. It meant that me and this friend, we ended up going through all of the Charr maps. Like back to back to back, we just kept playing them. And you could call that a beeline, I suppose. But we had so much fun here. So much fun. There might even be a video. I kind of went dark with making videos for that first week. Just because I just wanted to geek out and enjoy it as a fan. And then I know I did come back and give a review, of an immediate review of the personal story and the stuff. It's kind of weird to listen to my opinions from back then, to be honest. But I don't know whether I ever really talked about this. Maybe I did. But I basically had a real blast in these maps. And this is also where I ended up getting level 80 very quickly. Probably entered these maps around like 50 or something. And by the time I was done with them, I was 80. Because you can kind of just worm through them. And in the end, you're going to end up in the very northern Shiver Peaks. And everything's super high level. And just everything we killed. There were no players around anymore. The population was kind of gone. Because they were everywhere else, it felt like. And that's left me with this weird... By the way, this is a cool vista that you have to do this whole process to get to, walking along these cliffs. But if you use mounts, you can just skip all of that now. I always really, really hate that about mounts. That you miss out on that whole kind of mini jumping puzzle-esque experience. And again, that's one of those things where you'd see the vista and you'd survey the landscape to see, sort of reverse engineer how to get there. But now you just probably skimmer, or hell, you could probably even wrap to jump to it now. Anyway, yeah, I've always had this weird impression of these maps, like they were somehow like the neglected children of the game, that not enough people played them. Because I have launch memories of Zergs everywhere, but I don't have launch memories of Zergs in these areas. Because I kind of went through them a bit earlier. So here at Victimmoor's, there's a lot of Flame Legion-y stuff. Now, the truth is that it's the next Charr map that was really going to be big about meta events against the Flame Legion. If you watch my personal story, you'll know a bit about that. I guess I'll repeat some of those topics when we get there in the playlist. But you kind of get a bit of it here as well in the Iron Marches, except I just don't think it's done very well. The events don't like start very satisfyingly or chain together very satisfyingly. I always feel weird. Oh, by the way, look at the cart, the supply cart moving there. That is a damageable enemy supply cart that will actually move. Very weird. You would never see ArenaNet of today put something of that quality out. You can see one moving in the background as well. If this was ArenaNet of today, there'd be an actual Charr mounting it or something. I get the idea that we're amongst Flame Legion and it's supposed to be magic that's moving them, but they just look so awkward and strange. But yeah, I kind of don't like places like this, and it happens a lot when you go to ore as well, because I feel like I shouldn't be allowed to do this. And I know there's a lot of power creep in the game, but even at launch, this was possible. Just wading into clearly enemy territory with like these big gates and stuff either side, and you're just sort of vaguely wondering, hold on, shouldn't I maybe do an event to claim this area? Should I go somewhere safe and see if there's someone I can talk to and then push an event out? And sometimes that's possible, but often in maps like this, in this area, there's not. So you're just kind of wandering around like, well, map completion's kind of telling me to come here. It's just there's something disjointed about it that, I don't know, it makes me feel itchy to some degree. Like here you can even see the final events up. So we are meant to run through here, but all the enemies are still there. It's just weird. So that, of course, is a fire elemental, which is... That's not the only fire elemental in the game. The other fire elemental is at the Thornova Reactor meta event. This one is actually a shaman that's summoning it. There's actually a lot of cool details up there. There's a really cool story about a lot of female Charr and the Kala Rebellion, and there's a cool mechanic where you go into a flame bubble that defends you. With power creep, I don't think so much of that stuff matters anymore. That is also like one of those weird semi-world bosses, where it's kind of a good idea to go kill it. I think maybe he drops one of those items for the treasure hunter collection. Can't exactly recall. But yeah, we break through the gate. I suppose there's some novelty and some fun to breaking those. And here are some of the other actual events. But, you know, if you do these, I don't think they end up sweeping the whole way through. I don't know. Maybe there's not actually a problem with these maps. Maybe it's just my own knowledge of them has somehow failed me over all this time. And I never really got to see how they all sequence together. I think last time I was here, again, was because of Precursor Collections. Precursor Collections really did breathe a lot of life back into these places. But I appreciate As much as I've talked about those on this series, not everyone is doing that stuff. In fact, I would say very few people go for all of those, just because of the gold sinks that were attached to them when they came out, and people haven't reassessed the economies and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, yeah, 7 out of 10 waves defeated. This is actually going to be pretty good for this heart. Aid the allied legions as they march on the Flame Legion's territory. We don't even have to defend all of them. And I don't like this interaction as well. I really don't. I feel like hearts should like go on pause when places are under attack. They shouldn't accelerate an event shouldn't accelerate your heart progress. Like the fundamentals behind hearts, right, was ArenaNet built the game with dynamic events, and the point was to explore, and the events were the be all and end all. But people didn't know how to find them. They didn't quite know how to like figure out this new format of MMO that ArenaNet were going for. So they put hearts in as just a feature to direct you around. So you go to the heart, but you're still supposed to care about the events. The heart is just showing you a place where lots of events happen. And now, you know, the two are weaving together, but people just end up prioritizing the hearts over the events, and we're just going to leave, aren't we? So I don't know. I feel like maybe hearts should pause while events are going on, but then that's just going to feel awkward to people. There's a way through it. There is a way to make these two things integrate. ArenaNet never just quite nailed it. They're like 80% of the way there on a lot of this stuff. And the problem is that last 20% that they never quite ironed out, that's what takes the game from like good to genius. Do you know what I mean? And a true revolution in the MMO space, which is what they were going for. Another hero challenge, dealing with an Asura. You get to fight him and his golem. I was actually expecting a lot more Guild Wars content to be like this, where you're fighting an Asura plus their golem. No, I thought that in this game it was like they'd be inseparable. I thought that it'd be, if you played an Asura, you'd always be able to ride around on a golem and all these kinds of crazy ideas. This guy's actually pretty tanky. I think the dialogue in this one's quite funny as well. Just a nice little bit of levity after quite a lot of Flame Legion stuff's going on. I have to say as well, I think this area of the map is truly beautiful. The Ascalon music in general, with these like choral sounds and these harmonies going on in the background, is always nice. But something about up here feels just so peaceful and remote and nice. I think that's a theme for every single episode of this playlist so far. And what an efficient clear that's been as well. The final waypoint right next to the next map. Getting map completion. Beautiful. There's something really fun and elegant about watching this go through. I love it. So thanks very much to TechZoon. Thank you to everyone who's been listening to my commentary. Really appreciate it. Don't forget about Discord if you want to join. And until the next time, take it easy, guys. We're actually kind of close to the end now. Not too many episodes left. See you for the next one soon.